Since coming out of retreat, he has completed his Master of Divinity degree at Harvard Divinity School. Lama Rod also practices, studies and teaches secular mindfulness and is a teacher with the Inward Bound Mindfulness Education, where he is also a faculty member for the organization's teacher training program. He is also heavily engaged in social change activism and has just released a book with Reverend Angel Kyodo Williams and Jasmine Saudullah entitled Radical Dharma, Talking Race, Love and Liberation. He is the guiding teacher for the Radical Dharma Boston Collective. I just wanted to share a few words about my inspiration about this event taking place, which is that I arrived in London just over 5 years ago to study, and that was when I also connected with this Shambhala Centre and started practicing. And in my study, I was encountering voices who were able to articulate liberation from oppression in ways that were truly striking, and who are discussed within universities and elsewhere a lot. And I found that those voices were so striking and so connected to the Dharma I was learning, but yet I couldn't actually see any intersections happening at that time. So when this book, which I'm holding, came out, it was an instance of great joy that three voices were able to bring together those different ways of approaching liberation and compassionate ways to address my own involvement in privilege and structures of oppression. So I'm very, very glad that Lama Rod Owens is here in Europe, and particularly here in London this evening. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, everyone, for being here tonight. This is officially my first ever Dharma talk in London. So it's really quite special for me to be here tonight. So thank you all for taking time out of your busy Monday evenings to come and sit with me. I don't know, why you're here necessarily. I have no idea. I don't know what you want from me necessarily. I'm gonna give you something. I don't know if it's what you want. I've been surprising people in Europe. They think I'm just a regular Dharma teacher who talks about Dharma. And they're like, oh, why are you talking about race and class and everything? And then I say, why do you think I wouldn't talk about race and class and everything? Who told you that? So I'm here, and I've been here for about a month in Europe, traveling in Europe, and I'll be here another couple of weeks here in the UK. So, for me, it's quite an honor to be here tonight, kind of representing the Radical Dharma tradition, and maybe some of you have read the book. It was definitely a project that I really didn't understand until people read the book and told me what the book was about. And I thought, oh, that's it. That's what we were trying to do. On our end, we just kind of showed up places and talked, as we always talk. Between Reverend Angel and myself, this is how we talk with one another. We talk as friends, as siblings, as colleagues, about everything. So the dialogue that you read in the book isn't a special performance for people. This is how we talk, to one another, and to talk about what's difficult and what's challenging, but to do it situated within love. Love doesn't mean that we avoid anything. Compassion doesn't mean we avoid anything. I think that radical love, as particularly Reverend Angel talks about in Radical Dharma, it's about having these really hard conversations. It's about moving into the heart of pain and trauma, but doing it in a way that we don't blame ourselves. We don't judge ourselves. We say, this is a part of what it has meant to be human in the world. This is what I've accumulated, trying to be free, trying to be happy, trying to figure out why there's so much violence. Why there's so much violence happening in the world, and to be quite honest, why I am an agent of so much violence when I don't mean to. So for us, Radical Dharma began in a friendship between Reverend Angel and myself, and then that friendship extended to include Yasmin, Dr. Yasmin Saidullah, in that conversation and friendship. And it's been one of the most transformative relationships I've experienced in my life. To be with other Black people, to be with other Black women, to be with other Black queer women in relationship and dialogue, and we're not trying to hurt each other. We're not trying to criticize one another, where we're coming into relationship with each other, wanting each other to be better, to be happier, to be safer, And you don't really see that often, And I think for, those of us who may identify as being of color or Black, I think you resonate with that. Reading dialogue between Black people where we're not trying to dominate one another. We're not trying to show how smart we are. But we're trying to reach through the ways in which we've been conditioned to relate to one another. And hostility or competition or dominance, to reach through that into this space where we're just loving each other. So we said the dialogues were just really about us making love. There are all kinds of ways to make love. But in our work together, our love making is the way in which we feed each other's love, for not just ourselves, not just for our practice, but also for the world. That's this kind of radical vision that we're trying to offer. And this is the radical vision I try to offer in my own practice. But to do that in a way that's direct and uncomplicated. To do that in a way where I don't have to apologize, for giving voice to my own truth and reality. And I can do that anywhere I choose to do that in order to experience freedom and in order to inspire freedom and liberation. I think that we all have to figure out what our work is. I think we get real confused about what our work is, right? Like we're like, oh, I'm doing my work. Then someone comes up to you, they're like, what? Now you're doing this other person's work. What about your work? Like, let's evoke the profound energy and transformative teachings of Rihanna. Work, 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 work. She was doing her work. So if we don't get that video, then we need to go back. What was Rihanna calling us to do? And be prepared. Like, I am going to go right into pop culture, you know. If you read Radical Dharma, you know, it's all about hip hop and rap and R&B. You know, we wrote part of Radical Dharma to Bitch Better Have My Money. Literally, like, that's not, we didn't make that up. We were sitting around together one day and we were like, this video. Rihanna's video and Miss Piggy's video. You know, watch Miss Piggy's video of that song. And I digress, so that's also what you're going to experience tonight is digression. You know, so to do our work, you know, and for years I was like, oh, I'm doing my work. You know, I'm doing my work, right? You know, and I began to see that, oh, this is really easy. This work is really easy. I'm so fortunate. I'm so blessed to have really easy work in this life. And then when I came into Dharma, when I came into Buddhism, I was like, oh, I'm doing the wrong work. You know? And then the real work emerged, and the real work was like, oh, my pain, my woundedness. Not fixating and criticizing and judging yours, which we love to do. And we say, I'm doing my work, you're really fucked up. And you need to be on the plan right now. You need to be in therapy, or you need to be on the Dharma path, you need to do something, you know. But you know, I am practicing compassion by overseeing your work now. And that's my work. It's my commitment and my sacrifice, you know? And you realize over time that you don't really get anywhere. You know, isn't it funny? You're like, oh, you don't, like, and you're like, God, I'm still miserable. Even though I used to have a lot of fun overseeing your work. You know? And then the real blessing for me happened when the veils were pulled back, the curtain was pulled back, and all of a sudden I came into direct relationship with my basic situation. And my basic situation was just being deeply, deeply heartbroken. You know? That was the rise of Radical Dharma. It was definitely influenced by Ferguson, it was influenced by Black Lives Matter, it was influenced, for me, by Israel and the Gaza Strip and Palestine, which continues even right now. You know, Michael Brown's death, Trayvon Martin's death, you know, all that was happening, and all that deeply influenced how I felt as a person of color, as a Black man in America. But that's not what gave birth to Radical Dharma. It was the context. But what gave birth to Radical Dharma, for me, was this deep brokenheartedness that I couldn't avoid anymore. I couldn't, as Solange sings, I couldn't sex it away, I couldn't text it away, I couldn't do anything anymore. I just found myself paralyzed, immobile, dying. You know, hurt, paranoid, traumatized. You know, asking questions like, why doesn't the world love me? Why is my country trying to exterminate me? You know, why can't people love Black people? You know? And it's not just rooted in identity and race and class and gender, it's more than that, but this is so much a part of how we accumulate our trauma is through our identity, through the privilege and disprivilege of our identities, you know? And ultimately, yes, there's deep, deep, deep ego fixation, ego clinging. You know, there's an ego to be hurt, there's an ego to be traumatized, you know? But for me, I had to actually understand the reality of my relative self. You know, because my work is, and this is no one's work. No one's work is to bypass the relative, to go to the ultimate. And it's certainly not your work to tell me that I should do the same. That's going to be a beginning of an argument that you're not going to win. It's like, people come to me, they're like, and this is how I hear people, and people and their bullshit. It's like, I don't see race, I don't see gender, I don't see class. Like, I just think we're all just selfless, and we have Buddha nature. And, and I go, wow, like, you really believe that? There's truth in that. Don't tell me that. This is not a lie. This is truth. This is honest truth. But that's not the truth that's going to get you free right now. We need to start with the dirt. Instead of trying to think about the harvest. When are you going to plant your field? When are you going to plow this field of the relative, of identity, of violence, of trauma? When are you going to get into and get dirty with that? We all want peace and harmony. And believe me, I get that a lot. It's like, you just, I just think that, you're just like really, like, I'm so sorry that like you've had all this violence, and it's been, and racism, and then it gets really bad. It's like, this racism, and like, I just want to let you know that like, you don't have to like fixate on that, And it's like, you just learn to laugh at it, And some of you are just like getting pissed off right now, and I love it. I do love it, because we have to be disrupted, But I know that. I've read the book. I read that book, I saw the documentary, I saw the movie with Keanu Reeves playing the Buddha. That was the prerequisite, for all of us. I saw the Dalai Lama movie. Like, I've seen the movies, I get that. I know what ultimate reality is, I know what Buddha nature is, but like, don't cross the line in using ultimate teachings to enact violence. And that violence is erasing me. Because you actually can't deal with your guilt and your sadness. All that was part of my heartbreak. And just feeling that. Like, what are you feeling right now? And I feel, what am I feeling? When I tune into my mind, when I tune into my body, what am I feeling? I'm feeling rage. I'm feeling disappointment. I'm feeling sadness. I'm feeling aspects of my own racialized trauma. But I also feel space. I feel joy, and patience, and happiness, and kindness. Not just these things, not just the difficulty, but also this potentiality to realize the nature of these things. But they all have to come together. I don't bypass anything for the other. Everything is there. Our Buddha nature is in the mix, which complicates all of this. It's not this really clean, pretty thing that we emerge into. It's actually this quite complex situation, that stuns us, that continues to keep our hearts open and broken. But not just there. It's not just bleeding all over the place. It's not the suffering that's just there. But you begin to understand that like there's a teaching there. And there is the teacher, the guru, emerges within our own discomfort, our own pain, our heartbrokenness. And it's teaching us about the world. It's teaching us about who we are. And it's teaching us how to move through it into an authentic relationship and connection with our own basic natures. But you don't go around it, you don't go over it, you don't go under it. It's the bear hunt story. So you don't do all of that sophisticated maneuvering in order to maintain your comfort because someone told you that practicing Buddhism and meditation is about being comfortable. You know, someone says that. Someone says that. But it's actually about going into the difficulty. It's about going into your heart, your broken heart, and figuring out what it is. You know, experiencing, not reacting to. You know, there's a lot of violence that arises when we react to the pain, to the broken heart, and to the rage. I'm not reacting to my rage. I'm honoring it. I'm letting it be there. I'm not afraid of it. You know, it's teaching me right now. And it's in this process of letting it be there that is teaching me, and it's teaching me how to move through the arising of this difficulty. And it's not your fault. You know, I'm not actually here to blame anyone. I'm not actually here to tell you how fucked up you are. I mean, I may be telling you that, but you know, you may be hearing that, but that's not what I'm saying. I'm saying that we have work to do. You know, that your work isn't my work. You know. But what else am I saying? I'm saying that we're all connected. We're all interdependent. We're all, as Thich Nhat Hanh says, interrelated, which I love. We're deeply connected. We're deeply a part of each other's lives. You know, and whatever I do and say, and also think, will have a direct impact on you. And whatever you do or say or think will have an impact on me. There's an ethical responsibility, therefore, to bring an awareness to how we're showing up, to what we're doing, to what we're saying. You know? I have a responsibility to understand how I'm impacting you. You know? I mean, not everyone, of course, everyone in this space tonight, we're all coming from very different places. Some people, you know, are Buddhist, some people are not Buddhist. Some of you may sit a little bit. Some people are activists and organizers. Some people, you know, are just like interested in this. There's quite a range of people in this space. You know? So I don't want to presume anything, but the one thing I do want to presume is that you're interested in being free. You're interested in liberation, but I think that you're interested in liberation from another perspective, perhaps. So even if you're, you know, it doesn't matter what your orientation to meditation, of Buddhism, or Dharma is, I just want to be very clear to say that, like, we're impacting one another. You know, sometimes in ways that we have no idea. You know, and then someone comes up to us and they're like, do you realize that you're creating these obstacles for me? You know, of course, no one has ever had that said to them at all. You know, and of course, no one has ever had the experience of being completely confused about that statement. What are you talking about? I'm creating harm. I'm just being myself. You know, I'm just trying to be present. I'm just trying to do my practice. You know, like, wow, how can you say that? I think you're wrong. You know, and how confusing that can be for people. You know, so when people come to me, you know, people come to me and they say, you know, Rod, you know, you're like this guy. Like, you're this man, you know, you're this cisgender man, you're this man, and we feel like you should be doing more to disrupt patriarchy. And I say, what do you mean? I'm a Lama. Like, this is what I do. I teach this. I wrote Radical Dharma. What are you saying? You know, don't you know who I am? Did you not read my website? I am an international sensation now. A Buddhist international sensation, which means that I'm not, basically. And then that commitment that I have to go through, which is that process of saying, you know what? Maybe I am. You know, maybe I am, and how can I explore that? And then I go back into my own discomfort and say, you know what? How am I reacting to things? How am I being in the world in a way that is actually creating obstacles for people to be safe around me? What am I saying? What am I doing? How am I moving? You know, what am I assuming? You know, am I assuming that my life is just normal and that everyone else's life is just like mine, that I can just move through the world and not be bothered? You know, or people will react to me in the same way people react to you. You know, that's a great assumption. So I have to explore that. You know. So I think all this goes back to what I just said earlier, which is this relative identities. It's like, oh, this is very normal for me, but not normal for other people. This is what we're trying to disrupt, is this fixation or normality. You know, this fixation or normality, which makes it difficult for other people to feel as if they have a place in the world. That's part of what my heartbrokenness began to reveal early in the writing of Radical Dharma, is that like, oh, you know, so much of the violence that I've experienced in the world is unintended. You know, it wasn't like, oh, people were organizing against Rod. You know, like people weren't establishing institutions because they hated Rod. You know, it was just this aspect of who they thought I was. You know, and became less personal for me. You know, and eventually it got to a place where it's like, you know what, you don't know who I am. If you knew who I was, then you wouldn't do the things that you do intentionally or unintentionally. But you have to know who you are. You have to know who you are in order to begin to develop a clearer vision in relationship to others. But if you're always avoiding you, then that's going to create difficulty in being in authentic, liberatory relationships. So, you know, going back to this brokenheartedness, I guess the question that I have is, how do we move into the world deeply embracing our broken hearts? How do we lead with a broken heart itself? How do we begin to experience liberation through the broken heart? And that became my work, finally. And I used to think, God, this is so unfair. Like, why me? You know, and I realized, you know what, it isn't just me, because everyone else is hurting. You know? And if you're not hurting, you haven't looked closely enough. You know? And I'm not saying that people are hurting on the same level and the same intensity. I'm just saying that part of our basic experience is discomfort. On some level, through some intensity. And when we're not connected to that, then we become very tone deaf. You know, very violent, because we no longer have the sensitivity to hold each other's pain. So we just say and do whatever. Not intentionally, it's just because you just don't know. You know. And regardless, if you know or not, you must be held accountable. And that accountability isn't about, again, saying, oh, you're fucked up, you should go away. It's about, you know, How can we work through this deep wish, wanting people to be happy, to be free? How can we use that as a foundation to begin to create communities and relationships of restoration, of communication, of openness? How can we allow you to create the space, to blossom the space around the things that you have habitually avoided? How can we create spaces where we're safe enough to do that? To lead with our broken hearts, to look at the ways in which we are agents of violence, and to listen to the ways in which other people articulate the violence that they experience. And sometimes listening to people who articulate the violence that they experience with us. Instead of bypassing, instead of gaslighting, which is this whole idea, the practice of like, well, I just think you're like, just not okay. It's really you. It's really you that's confused. It's like a Jedi mind trick. So if you're in Buddhist spaces, what does that look like? Oh, you know what? You need to. It's really your pain, and you just really need to sit with it. Again, that's true. But what is your role in this relationship? There's so many brilliant people in our Dharma spaces who are just very skillful in how they give Dharma advice, but how they mask that Dharma advice. And behind that Dharma advice is just this act of violence. This act of like stepping away from their relationship to our own discomfort. You have to cut through those Jedi mind tricks. And you say, well, thank you for your Dharma teaching, but that's not what I'm talking about. And such a beautiful teaching, you should write that down and publish a book, like everyone else. But what I'm talking about is our relationship right now in the moment. So let's sit a little bit. I want to introduce you to just a short practice. I love it how like everyone's just like, I'm going to get into position. You pull the Beyonce, you're like, formation. Like, okay, everyone, it's a formation, Meanwhile, I have not moved an inch. I'm comfortable, I'm not changing. So maybe there are people who are new to meditating tonight, and congratulations for this. This is a milestone, but if you're not new, welcome. So when I began to practice, I bring instructions and pedagogies of liberation and strategies of liberation into everything that I try to do, particularly in meditation instruction. So one of the things that I try to do as a person of color, as a black person who has experienced trauma because of the ways in which racial trauma has impacted my body. One of the things I've had to understand is that my body isn't always safe for me to be in. And so when we began this practice, it's so important that we just do some initial check-ins with the body. That for me, it energetically feels like I'm just kind of tapping with my attention. Are you okay? Can I come in today? If not, that's fine. So beginning that by first asking the body, your body, what it needs right now. It's a complex question. It's not easy. It's just the first step. Oh, what do I need right now? What does this physical body need right now? And allowing the physical body to respond, not through the mind, but through sensation. And it's going to tell you how it is right now. And as I continue, being careful, being cautious, step by step, and please assert your agency. And I mean that you don't have to do everything that I ask you to do. Disrupt that. Put yourself first. So I want you to bring your attention to the weight of your body. Just feeling the weight of the body. Feeling the mass of the body, the density of the body. Can you notice the body being held to the seat? What is your experience of gravity in this moment? And if you're sitting on a chair, feeling the ground under your feet. Feeling the feet as well. Can you consciously allow the seat to hold you? Can you trust the seat to hold you? Can you trust the ground to hold you? Or can you give rise to some trust right now? So as much as you can in this moment, simply allowing the body, your body, to be on the seat. Allowing the body to be just as it is in this moment. Now shifting your attention to the breath. Just noticing the in-breath and the out-breath. Not changing the breath, not altering. Just tuning into the breath as it is naturally breathing. This is your natural breath. Just in the same way your body is naturally sitting on the seat, you're naturally simply breathing. Don't make this so complicated. We're shifting our attention to our minds and just noticing the thoughts, noticing feelings. Not thinking about anything, but just noticing that you're thinking, that you're feeling. It doesn't matter how the mind is right now. It doesn't matter if it's in chaos. It doesn't matter if it's calm. That's not the point right now. The point is that you're just noticing where the mind is, where your thoughts are, where your feelings are. This is your natural mind. Just like the body, just like the breath, it simply is. It's not a matter of right or wrong. It's just how it is in this moment. And now moving into the space of contemplation, I want you to start evoking your people, your sources of refuge. I want you to begin by reflecting on and inviting your teachers into the space. Your guides, your gurus, your spiritual advisors, your imams, your priests, your ministers, the elders, the people you go to for advice, for wisdom, the people who show you who you are even though you resist it, the beings who love you and want you to be free. This can be any being, someone that's living, someone that's past, someone we only maybe read about but we're inspired by. It can be a spirit, a deity. Who are your wisdom beings? And next, what are your sacred texts? What are the teachings, the books, the writings that help you to experience clarity, openness, honesty, love, compassion, kindness. What are your quotes that you return to over and over again? What are the social media memes that remind you of who you are? What are the songs, the arts? What transmits clarity, openness, honesty, and wisdom to you? These are your sacred texts, and invite them into the space. And next, what are the communities that love you? What are the communities where you feel as if you can express love? Where do you belong? Thinking about those spaces, those groups, those communities, invite them into the space. And next, who are your ancestors? Where do you come from? What were you born into? What is your lineage? It can be a family lineage, it can be a spiritual lineage, it can be a lineage of great writers or thinkers or social justice. Who came before you and created the causes and conditions for you to have your life right now? And who are those who will come after us? And next, invite the earth into the space, the sacred ground, the foundation of life and thriving. Without the earth, there would be no life, so invite the earth. Remember the earth. And next, evoke the silence. Let the silence be a partner, a lover. Let it give birth to you. Lean back into it. Use the silence to learn how to articulate what's right and true for us. And last, invite yourself into this space. The totality of your experiences, both pleasant and unpleasant. Every part of your being deserves to be here. Let it be here. So these are your sources of refuge. Your teachers and guides, your sacred texts, the communities that love you, the ancestors, the earth, silence, and yourself. So, returning back to the body now, and again being careful, being cautious. When we feel triggered or off, just returning back to the ground, returning back to the weight of the body, to our feet on the floor. Returning back to our sources of refuge to remind us that we're not alone. So bringing our attention into the body. Where do you begin to notice emotion in your body? Where do you notice your happiness at? Where do you experience patience in your body? Where do you experience kindness in your body? Where do you experience anger in the body? Where's your sadness at in the body? And looking at more of the unpleasurable emotions in the body, our sadness, our anger. Go to wherever these emotions are arising, be it sadness or anger, impatience, or whatever it may be, whatever you're working with right now. And imagine that you're beginning to breathe in to that part of the body you feel that this emotion is arising strongly in. So breathing in. And as you breathe in, feeling the expansion of the space of that part of the body. Feeling the room, the space begin to open up. Allowing space around that difficult experience to open. And as you're breathing in, expanding, also imagine that some of that difficulty begins to dissolve in the in-breath. And as you breathe out, sending that energy out of the body, that discomfort out of the body. So breathing in, expanding, dissolving, and breathing out. Allow the breath to give this sensation, this experience, lots of space. We slowly begin to shift our attention again away from the body, the sensation of emotions, and bring our attention back to the earth, to the ground. Feeling the ground under us, feeling our seats, feeling the weight of the body on the seat. So bring your arms above your head. Stretch up, trying to touch the roof, the sky, feeling the stretch coming down into the lower body. Imagining this, letting this energy that you've uncovered and triggered rise up and shoot out through your fingertips, through the top of your head, through your arms. And bringing your arms down and just beginning to gently pat yourself, your legs, your arms. Just rubbing and patting. You're letting things move and circulate. You've unlocked a lot of emotional latent energy. You want to get that moving out of the body, circulating around. So we're going to just take a 5-minute break, and we'll come back for questions and answers. Or what I like to call, you ask a question and I make up an answer. So please get up and move around, walk, get some water, come back, So I'd just like to open up the space for just any questions you may have, any dialogue that we want to initiate. I think that would be wonderful. Do we have a microphone? Yeah, we have a microphone.
Hi.
Hi.
What's a broken heart?
I'm sorry.
What's a broken heart?
It's a broken heart. That's a really good question. I think the broken heart comes from this realization that the world isn't what we thought it was. And it's the experience of this deep discomfort which may arise as sadness, as hopelessness, as loss of focus, as trauma. So I think it's the arising of the world as it is in conflict with our fantasies of the world. There's just this tension there that begins, and that's the heartbreak. That tension when you realize, oh, this is how it is. And that space that opens up where we have to mourn and grieve for this lost, impression of what we thought the world was. And that's not where we stay, but it's where we start. And I think that so many of us don't allow ourselves to spend enough time there. Sometimes it's like, oh, I get it, moving on. But no, like letting the heart break open. The tenderness, the woundedness, let it all break open. As you let that break open, you begin to fall apart. And then in falling apart, the potentiality to rebuild yourself in a new way arises. Yeah, you're working hard. I love it. I see you going through it.
I don't like it. I'm not into it. Just to let you know. I'm not,
Yeah. No, it's not supposed to be fun. It's not supposed to be pleasant. I would be surprised if you were.
How do you make yourself stay there?
I lost the ability to bypass it. That's where radical Dharma came from. That's where radical Dharma came from. That was the beginning. I just couldn't avoid it anymore. You know, again, it was that specific summer. It was the summer of 2014. You know, particularly in America, where it was Ferguson. You know, it was seeing the body of this young black man who was just like me, lying in the streets, over and over again. You know. It was the pain that was erupting in that community that began to be echoed in my body, you know. And I just kind of sat there. It was like I can't avoid. It was just there. It was like I couldn't listen to music. I couldn't like get high. I couldn't like have sex and just lose myself in that. It was just there. I would watch the news. I would watch Israel bombing the Gaza Strip, and I felt like those bombs were just falling on me. I felt out like I was the one lying in that street like Michael Brown. It was just raw. And I was like, this is the world, you know? And by then I had enough Dharma practice to realize that like, I was just kind of like, I had to be here. You know, I knew too much by then. I didn't have any excuse not to stay there. But I think that's something we get to eventually. You know, you have to get tired. You have to get tired of all the energy that we're putting in, bypassing and skipping around. And you're like, you know what, I'm just gonna sit here. I'm tired. You know, I think of Fannie Lou Hamer. You know, Fannie Lou Hamer was a great American, you know, was, you know, organizer, activist, you know, mid-1900s, but she was like, I'm sick and tired of being sick and tired. You get to that place, you're just like, okay. It's beautiful, though. It's a really beautiful spot to get to, where you just let it happen. And you're just a mess. You can't concentrate, you can't focus, and people are like, what's wrong with you? Girl, what's wrong with you? Then your friends are doing interventions. You know, you don't want to go out to the club anymore, and they're like people are like, what's wrong with you? You don't want to go out? You know? Because what happens is you begin to prioritize taking care of that broken heart. You first and foremost pay attention to it. How do you take care of someone that you love? We don't ignore people. We should, you know. If we want someone to be free from suffering, or we want someone to be happy, or if we're like in a relationship to someone, we pay attention to them. We offer them attention. We offer them communication. We sit with them. You sit with it. And it's not this extraordinary thing. You say, oh, this is mine. You know, I I fell in love with it in a way, in a real way. I fell in love with it. I was like, I have to love even you. And you want to talk about being free. You start loving the shit, the darkness, the shadow. You don't try to fill it up. Don't try to fill up the hole, the darkness. Start loving it. Let it be there. And then you start saying, you know what, it's okay. It's okay. I feel like this. My heart is breaking. I'm falling apart. You know what, it's okay. And then with Radical Dharma, I began to understand that this could be where my activism emerges from. And that transformed everything for me. It's like, no, I'm not trying to be in the world disrupting things and addressing violence because I'm angry. I am angry, but that's not what I'm doing. I'm doing it because people are hurting, because I'm hurting. And I don't want people to hurt. I don't want to hurt. Then you let the broken heart guide you into making the best choices about how to alleviate suffering. Not to perpetuate it, but to alleviate it. I'm writing a book about this, so there are more detailed instructions coming out about this. Mm-hmm. I'm dedicated to you. What's your name? Laura? Yeah. I'll forget, but not yet. I'm recording it though. I'm recording it on my phone, so I'll go back and listen and say, oh, Laura. To Laura and her broken heart.
I don't have one yet.
Oh, you will. You will. You have to relax. You just start relaxing. Yeah. It's there. It's behind all of our defenses and all our barriers and our walls and all the ways in which we've been told to be strong and to be vulnerable, to be impenetrable. Because this is who we are in the world. This is our relative identity, and we have to have a strength. The world will not hurt me. There's a balance there. Obviously, there's a balance there. And so for me, vulnerability is how I get into that balance, meaning that I can be open, I can fall apart, but I can also do it in a way that can be smart about it. We have to stay functioning sometimes. On one end, it sounds like I say fall apart and you just become inactive. But what I'm also saying is that allow that falling apart to begin to fuel a different way of connecting to people, connecting to the work. It may be that you stop. I had to stop for a period. When I was transitioning out of direct action work, and organizing and coming into meditation and Dharma, there was a period where I had to stop that work, that activism, and then engage 100% on the path, doing the spiritual work. And then after that period, I was able to start doing the work of bringing both my activism and my spiritual practice together, which is something I'm always working on.
Also when Mike Brown died in 2014, that's what spurred me into more direct racial justice activism in the United States. I was a member of BYP, I am a member of BYP 100 out there.
Oh, yeah.
And one thing I saw is, like, as me and my group of friends just became completely, like, absorbed in the movement, it killed us.
Yeah.
It's literally killed some of my friends, and, like, has spiritually and emotionally and mentally hurt so many people in my community. And I think, similar to you, I'm at the point where, like, okay, I need to fuel my spirituality and start fixing myself and just sitting in the pain. But there's so much guilt that comes of, like, being out here and, like, working on healing myself while my friends are still out there. So, like, how do you both deal with that guilt? And also, when do you know that balance between, like, working on yourself but still moving in action?
And the movement is killing us. You know, the suicide rate, you know, is rising with the organizers. And I guess the question for me, you know, how I've worked with that question is, like, how can I be most effective? You know, is it the best use of my body to sacrifice it? Or is the most profound activism that I can engage in, could that be thriving? Because these systems want us to run ourselves down and to not survive, because it's really convenient. And for Black people in America, that's really how the system has been constructed, to exterminate us. It's either through state-sanctioned violence, or it's through trauma, or it's through us taking on all this work and doing it in a way in which we're just sacrificing our bodies and our spirits and our minds over and over again until we get burnt out, until we get really shut down, until we start really struggling in different forms of mental illness. You know, and all of that begins to be reflected in the data that we have about our mortality. You know, we're dying younger, we're dying quicker, we have so many body-borne and mental illnesses. You know, that's an expression of oppression, but more specifically, it's an expression of the ways in which we haven't learned how to disrupt oppression within our spirits and our minds and our bodies. And we have to start modeling that work. And this is what, the last time I talked to Patrice, I was like, I need you to be okay, you know, with her practice. You know, I need you to take time. And so for a while, I was just like checking in with her, because we need you to be, like, you're the visible part of our movement. You know, granted, I haven't checked in a while, but I hope she's still practicing and getting everything done. And that's the kind of accountability we can start. And I know that, like, there's the self-preservation, self-care work that's being done right now in the movement. So I know people who are trying to get that going. But so, Audre Lorde, was anyone on retreat with me this weekend? Everyone was like, oh, I'm coming. Everyone's like, huh? It was full, yeah. So people on retreat, they were just like, no, we're gonna come back to London. We're gonna come on Monday night, of course, right? I'm the same way. I'm like, girl, I'll be there, you know. But we talked a lot about self-preservation. We talked a lot about how Audre Lorde speaks of self-care, about self-care, self-preservation actually being an act of political warfare. We have to bring that mentality back into the work. Like, me thriving and taking care of myself is going to eventually begin to undo the system, because I will slowly begin to disrupt the ways in which oppression is forcing me, you know, to run down. You know, it's also the ways in which we're relating to one another as well within our community. So we have to understand how to hold the trauma and not react to the trauma and make each other victims of this unmetabolized trauma within our communities. You know, so self-preservation and self-care, meaning that I'm doing something that helps me to come back into the work, it helps me to come back into relationships. I'm not doing something that's going to perpetually keep me self-isolated. You know. It's, yeah. We'll come to you next. Yeah. So if you read Radical Dharma, who's read Radical Dharma? So we have a joke in the book. Yasmin and I, we talk about going to the spa, to the nail spa. I don't know if you remember that. But it was a serious point that we were making. We did get our nails done one day. And this was right after the Charleston massacre. A couple of years ago, where 9, Black people were murdered in church in Charleston, South Carolina, and we were just like feeling that. And we were all together, and we were just like, we need to go do something to take care of ourselves. So we went to Old Navy, or I went to Old Navy in the H&M, and then I got my nails done. And then that same night, we had our last Radical Dharma talk that we put in the book, and we were like, we went to the spa today, to the nail spa, we went shopping, and we were like, this was an act of self-preservation, because I needed something else to do to get my mind off of this. I needed spaciousness, and we can be skillful about that. I did that not to stay in that space, but to come back, and that helped me to come back that evening. It helped both of us to come back that evening to have this talk. And that evening, it was also a memorial service too, for the massacre that we did. So our self-preservation, it looks different. Everyone's self-preservation looks different. Mine includes the spa. But I don't stay there, but it helps to renew me, and it helps me to enter back into this work, which is the work that I'm constantly doing. And it's not just about racial violence, it's about transphobia, it's around gender, it's about anti-queerness, there's all kinds of violence, there's all kinds of trauma that we're experiencing in our communities, and we have to start practicing radical self-preservation. I love thinking about Stonewall, the beginning of the gay rights movement, that was just this act. That was like, you know what? We're gonna start transforming this, That, as again, Audre Lorde, the transformation of anger, the uses of anger, is a really important way for us to understand how we can transform anger and understand the data of anger and how to cultivate our anger, which is also what I'm writing about in this new book, how to cultivate anger. Not as something we have to get rid of to avoid, but as something that we begin to recenter and begin to understand that it's actually showing us something really vital about what we're experiencing in the world in the moment. It's not necessarily there for us to react to, but it's there for us to learn from. So we can, this is the mic.
There's 2 points. One, because I have mixed race. Don't use it. Please use it. Yeah, okay. Yeah, thank you very much, and bless you, and thank you for coming to Clapham. Clapham was this great town where slavery was supposed to end.
Oh, wow.
And William Wilberforce was one of the Clapham Society. So when I came to live here 5 years ago, it was interesting to look into that history and see how there was still hidden slavery going on. And as a mum of 4 mixed-race children, their fathers from the Caribbean, it was interesting to look at that history. So your energy coming here tonight is very blessed for the ancestors, because we found that there must be hidden burials, a huge cover-up on where a lot of the West African mixed cultural community were actually buried. So I wanted to thank you on behalf of the ancestors, all the mums for 400 years for coming. And so it's very, I wasn't actually coming, and suddenly made me come. So
Ancestors.
Ancestors, yeah. So my son is profoundly deaf, and I've learned a lot from him visually, and with that whole community, my real question is, the media is a big input on keeping us all out of the Dharma.
The media?
Yeah, the global media, and So we don't have like the Dharma news, the good news, the real news, her story, history, the LGBT news. And because of that, the youth, I have 3 teenagers. And as you're saying, in America, here and across, there's a feeling that they're glorifying the trauma, crime, horror, oppression, and, with social media, WhatsApp. And we say, what's that? Because we don't know as mums, And it's the glorification of these events you're talking about in America that you're trying to stop. So we don't see maybe you meditating under a tree with your friends, trying to stop it.
Right.
And we go, wow, it's brilliant. We see these terrible events, like same in Israel, Palestine. So my real question is that how do we as moms, as a global multi-faith forum, New World, Save the Planet, people really work through the media, and shift the Dharma into the media. So the news, see, one of the oppressions, I know I'm dragging on, but in England, this sort of cult of slavery, opium, they used opium, that's what we found out. They run cocaine, but they run opium. So if you sedate people, they have. So every hour on the hour across the planet, we have the most terrible 10 things that have happened. We don't have you on the news going, good morning, nothing's happened. Breathe deeply, one love.
So
how do we shift that through the Hollywood, through the pop music, so the positive news, the good love stories? We've lost a few icons.
I think I'll just say, I'll answer it. I want to address the ancestor question first and then get into the media. The ancestors, I know that, people have always interesting reactions when I talk about ancestors. But what I began to understand was that, in a lot of Buddhist communities, even in Shambhala, we have the refuge tree, the field of refuge. And I have been practicing with that for years and years, and what I began to see was that, these are just my ancestors. This field of refuge, which we don't have a representation in front of me, but but this traditional representation of all the deities and bodhisattvas and so forth are just my lineage. They're my ancestry. And then as a person who is descendant from slaves, what I was also encouraged to do was to think about my actual familiar ancestry, because I do believe in the reality of transhistorical trauma and intergenerational trauma. So ancestor practice helped me to actually wrap my mind around how the trauma that my ancestors experienced are the same traumas that I experienced, because those traumas are being passed from generation to generation. So ancestor practice helps me to disrupt and to work with trauma as it's been passed down through my family. And so my ethical responsibility is to disrupt that trauma from being passed into the future generations. So this is why I lead visualizations and practices around that. And I have more extensive practices around ancestor work that we do in Radical Dharma. So that's that piece. Secondly, so the media, we have to, I got to a point, and I get really angry about it. I get angry, by the way. I respond to anger sometimes, But when people, the violence, particularly, I remember this happening with Walter Scott, when Walter Scott was a black man who was shot 6 times in the back, running away. And that was all filmed, and how that was repeated over and over and over again. I just got to a point I was like, this is how I'm being re-triggered over and over again. And I began to understand that I have to start divesting from this kind of media. Whereas so many of us are really attached to it, we're addicted to it. So I have friends in BLM, who are just like, no, we have to see these images over and over again. I completely disagree. I can't do that anymore, So when I see that, I block it, around me. But in the larger sense, I think generally, we have to start divesting from our consumption of violence, We talk about, I want to see, good things happen, there is good news. You know, there are really positive, there's Buddhist media that puts out like videos all the time and little things like that. We have to start reorienting ourselves towards consuming that, you know? And so when I work with teenagers, so I work with a lot of teens, and so one of the things I work with them on is how to do these practices of self-love, self-care, you know, so that's not feeding into their consumption of violence, you know, or their participation in violence as well. Slowly, we begin to work with people around us. You know, if we have social media platforms, how do we share things? You know, like what are we sharing on our platforms? And what are we liking? And what are we like consuming ourselves? Because that's going to build, as we see now, it builds algorithms that keeps us really entrenched in receiving certain kinds of material and media. You know, so that's the work we have to do, and also we have to support Buddhist media. You know, if you want to see more Buddhist media, you know, find a way to support these outlets. You know, create outlets. You know, there's so many podcasts now, you know, that are highlighting the voices of so many different interesting people, not just in Buddhism, but in contemplative practice. You know, particularly in contemplative practice and social justice realms. You know, there's a lot happening there, and so promote those podcasts. You know, I try to make this really strong intention to financially support media, you know, that's positive and critical, you know, and that's trying to get us woke and free, you know, but also not so. I want to support media that's also very clear and critical. You know, not just something that's really left and progressive and radical, but like I want the facts, you know.
Get on Good Morning Telly.
Is that?
Get on Good Morning Telly. At the moment they're trying to say that, you know, all the youth are so violent, but they never put anything good that they're trying to do.
Can I make a plea for some, and can I ask who they
Uh-huh.
are?
The
Because
BBC,
we are all they,
the BBC,
and
I'm
we're
talking
all
about
here,
the BBC.
and some of us are.
Yeah, the BBC.
There's some, I'm just,
No, I agree with what I'm saying.
Thanks.
Lots of good news. Lots of good news. That's what we
Can you use the
want.
mic, please?
We're all saying good things.
There's a microphone.
Sorry. What I was saying is not personal to anyone in the room, that the news likes to tell people every hour these, you know, or look how not all these wonderful people like yourself and everybody are doing good things. They're trying to say there's this terrible rise in violence, and they use the youth to scapegoat the bigger problem, which is selling things, and then you say like the echo in Gaza.
Yeah.
So to stop it,
Yeah.
the more of us at yourself, even if you go on breakfast telly and say, you know, even if you, whatever it is, try for everyone to try to move it through the radio, through the system.
And
to
that's
and stop it,
organizing.
like you're saying,
Yeah.
turn around and stop the...
Yeah, and you have
Because
to.
all the good youth
Yeah.
are doing lots and lots of wonderful things.
Yeah.
It's harder for them to make a poster, to make a plea, to get on the radio or the news. So it's a struggle for the good news to get through the media. Not that there's not so good people.
I mean, that's overall.
That's why we need the radical
people,
push.
Yeah, well,
We need you on the Good Morning Tomorrow with
I may
Piers Morgan,
actually,
yeah.
I am. I am like making a move into national media, you know, but it's not like something that like sells. Like it's like me hopping on a radio show, which is what I'm doing mostly these days. It's not like people aren't like excited that I'm talking about this on, you know, on the national media.
It's 100% important.
Yes,
Thank
I
you
agree.
very much. So it's not a point of, sometimes people say, oh, why do you wear purple?
Yeah.
And I say, because it protects me.
Yeah.
Not because I'm trying, you know, so when we have something to say, because we're guided for the youth, which other ancestors return, you have to do it.
Yeah.
So it's something that has to happen for us to continue.
Yeah.
So it's very important. So thank you very much.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Yeah, we have a question here. Yeah.
Thank you. And thanks to everyone here for sharing this with me. So I'm just about to finish university. And my university is quite politically active.
Uh-huh.
And throughout university, the one thing I just couldn't stand hearing the most was, the revolution starts with you. Because I was like, no, it doesn't. Like, there are like material struggles going on in the world, and me revolutionizing myself is not going to change that. There are realities that my love can't touch. So we just need to change the political system and all this kind of stuff. And today, listening to you, I was just telling Kaylin that I walked in here and I got an answer to a question that I didn't really expect to have. And it's not just from what you've said, but I guess it's an accumulation of things I've been hearing, that the revolution does have to start with you, because until you are what you want to be, until you are the change you want to see, your action, that will be reflected in your action. Your action will not be as desired as you would like it to be. Now, what you said, I'm going to get to the question. Okay. What you said about how your action affects the people around you, and theirs does to you as well, and you've got to be aware of that. It's similar to that point now, but my question is, how do you, being aware of it, how do you not become obsessed with watching yourself affect the people around you, you either love or you don't love? Just how do you watch yourself without having having it be your superego watching yourself? You know what I mean?
And I was, I remember in my 20s and being in university, I was like all about the revolution. And of course, the Gandhi quote, "You become the change you wish to see." I was all about that. Was like my motto in life, But I think also that becomes a distraction as well. I can't do anything until I become the change, and then it gives people an excuse not to do anything, because I'm not good enough yet. I'm not anti-racist enough, and so I think what that quote was trying, as if Gandhi was anti-racist, but but I think that it's about initiating something, and then as we begin to move towards what we most need to be, we're beginning to slowly change how we're acting in the world. So as I change, I'm also impacting how I'm showing up, what I'm saying, what I'm doing. It's a process of getting woke and conscious, and we just can't say that, oh, you're just going to get woke. No, wokeness and enlightenment. So woke, when I say woke, I mean more socially woke, but that also is related to to ultimate enlightenment. This is all a process, and the more we move along the process, the more effective we become as in terms of disrupting violence that we create, and the violence and holding the violence that we're experiencing on a daily level. And so when people get really obsessed about, oh, I can't do anything because I'm gonna create violence, or right now in the Me Too movement, right now this is whole counter narrative about how men can't do anything. It's no, predators can't do anything. And it's let's get really specific about what we're talking about, what we're trying to do. And well, let me step back one step and just say that when we're obsessing about how we're always impacting an environment, for me, that's a sign of disembodiment. We're outside of our bodies trying to collect data about how we're impacting the world. Instead, if we're practicing embodiment, what we're actually doing is beginning to feel how we're in the world. And that sensation, those sensations actually you begin to feel when you're violent. I don't have to sit around and just kind of wait to get feedback. I can feel it. I'm oh, I just said something is really fucked up. Okay. I don't need someone to tell me necessarily. Sometimes you do, right? But then you also have to let people have the responsibility of working through their reactions, their relationship to how you're showing up as well. So it's not you take complete responsibility, because it's impossible. That's this whole interrelatedness is I can do everything that I can to limit violence, but I still will create violence.
So just before I pass this mic on, would you say that the slip between awareness and unhealthy overanalysis would be feeling, to feel it?
It's the body. And being in university, you're not being encouraged to be in your body. You're encouraged to be in your head. The mind moves much quicker than the body. This is why we do embodiment practice. This is why yoga, the traditions of union between body and mind is so important, because the body slows the mind down, and the body is telling the truth. You know, so sensation is truth. You may not know what it's saying, but you can feel it, you know. And so it's when the mind gets involved, it begins to reinterpret what sensations are, you know. But when we start privileging the basic experience of sensations and begin to link that into what we're experiencing in the world, and there's a very direct, pure language that begins to emerge, you know. So without that union, we pass the mic over here. So without that union, then you're not getting all the data around you.
Well, first off, not to make commercial, but because I thought might interest some of you, is that I work for a political platform called The Alternative UK.
Uh-huh.
Every day we write a daily alternative as kind of like an alternative to, you know, the mainstream media. And we're also trying to bring about sort of a slow, locally based system change. So if any of you are interested, it's also, we're 2 Buddhists in the main team, so that definitely affects a lot of it. So The Alternative UK, if you're interested. And question. I really liked sort of the way you've said that we're stepping away from each other's discomfort. And I sort of realized we're doing that all the time, and in a sense, that also means we're stepping away from our own discomfort in the act of stepping away from others' discomfort, I think. At least that's how I see it. So what are the experiences that you've had of stepping into someone's discomfort, or with others, where you've been present with each other's discomfort? And perhaps how can we start to bring about these situations?
I think that the goal is to move into discomfort, not just our discomfort, but discomfort of others. And I do that through holding space. You know, so this whole practice of holding space, which means that first and foremost, I am aware of what I'm experiencing in a situation. And then as I learn to be more aware of my situation, I'm actually learning how not to react so much. You know, and when I limit my reactions, then there's a space that opens up for other people to be there. You know. So if we think about the experiences we've had where people have held space for us, what has that been like? It just feels like people are just present. You know, and I think people are present because they're present to what's coming up. People aren't distracted trying to avoid what's coming up for them. You know, so when I sit with people in these situations, it's like, you know, it can be like a really intense situation. First and foremost, I acknowledge my discomfort. You know, I just say, you know what, I'm experiencing this right now, and it's okay. You know, and then that opens up this other space for people to have their experiences. You know, because it's really about me. You know, this is the contradiction of this whole thing here. It's like, yeah, we're supposed to be compassionate, but really it's about us because the work begins with us. You know, I'm not saying that you can't be compassionate and loving and not do work for yourself, but you're going to hit a limit. And what I'm interested in is sustainability and limitlessness. You know, and we do that by taking care of ourselves. You know, we hold space for ourselves as we hold space for others. We feed others as we feed ourselves. You know, this whole kind of martyr mentality is really not useful for some of us. You know, it's like, oh, I'm going to sacrifice myself. Well, fine. I'm more interested in how can I create sustainability and practice sustainability, because this is the long game. here. This is like, I mean, not everyone believes in lifetimes and reincarnation, but I do. You know, and I believe that, oh, this is the work that I keep doing over and over again. So it's not just about this life, even though this life is extremely important. I'm also preparing for the next life to come back into the world as being a change agent as well. You know, and that helps me to negotiate my relationship to death as well. I see death as continuation. You know, and if we can bridge our political action into that kind of spiritual thinking, then we begin to transform our fear. You know, and we learn how to dedicate we learn how to dedicate ourselves to the path of both social and ultimate liberation, how it begins to come together. It's not these two different things that I'm like, okay, I'm going to do social liberation here, then I'm going to go to the Dharma Center and do ultimate liberation. You know, it's the same. We're working our way through the relative in order to earn our experience of the ultimate. You know, that's radical Dharma. You know. Holding space, emotional labor is also a part of holding space as well. So this emotional labor where we're holding space for people and helping people to process through emotions. And that processing meaning that we're helping people to contact their emotional reality, to articulate their emotional reality. So we're not therapists, you know, but we're just saying, okay, how can we help people articulate what's happening for them? And this is the work that I do with other male-identified practitioners and undoing patriarchy work, where it's like, let's start connecting to something more than just anger or lust or hunger. You know, but let's get down into like experiencing our sadness, our disappointments, our heartbrokenness, and let's stop demanding that people around us take care of us. You know. So we're moving into other people's suffering, but we're actually moving closer into ours. And you have Tonglen. You know, Tonglen is taught and practiced in communities like this, and taking and receiving, which is a practice where we're breathing in the suffering of other people, and that freaks people out. You know, you talk about smoke, you know, I'm breathing in the smoke of your suffering. I had to change that because people were flipping out over that. I was like, I can't do that. I absolutely can't do that. So I was like, hey, let's think about different ways of thinking about Tonglen, you know. But Tonglen is really about us, you know. Not that I don't experience or believe that the more realization we accomplish or achieve, the more we're able to actually take on other people's suffering. I think that's possible, but like right now, me, Rod, I have my hands full with trying to deal with my suffering. But as I deal with my suffering, I'm actually helping other people because I'm not expecting people to handle me, to hold me when they come to me for support. Like I'm doing that for myself, and that begins to alleviate suffering in people's experience. When they know that like they don't have to do this work to take care of me, that I'm doing it for myself. That's what we feel. Like I don't feel like people are taking on my suffering. I feel that people are just like hearing me. You know, I feel like people are just with me. They're not distracted, and I love that. That helps me out so much to feel better, to feel less suffering. I'm writing about that. I'm writing about this too. I'm gonna do a remix of Tonglen. I'm gonna get Pema Chodron and run for money. No, I'm kidding. Don't report that back to the administration. People do. I show up to a Shambhala center and all of a sudden I get an email from someone saying, we heard. So you can't do that. Yes, we're almost, I guess we're out of time. Thank you for setting that limit. Is there one question, a burning question for someone? Yeah, you had your hand up for a while, didn't you? I'm sorry. And two more. I promise I'm gonna get this quick. I know we want to get home and watch our shows.
No pressure.
Hi.
Hi. How can you work on increasing your sense of self-worth when you've kind of lived through a lot of violence and you inflict it on yourself?
I think what we begin to do is begin to see and develop a direct experience of who we are. That's not about the violence that we experience, but it's about our basic, as we would say, our basic nature, our basic goodness. So for me, I had to do that by actually disrupting the voices and these things from outside that were trying to tell me who I was and what I was. And I had to also begin to limit the voices that were telling me that I wasn't good enough. And I did that, through basic meditation, but also through loving kindness practice. Through Tonglen was also really important for me. And slowly you begin to hear yourself, to see yourself, to touch into who you are, which is beyond the violence. And that's a taste that you get of yourself that you begin to use, to cultivate. So I have a better sense of who I am, and I also have a better sense of the violence and the trauma that I've experienced. And I can differentiate between the two much more. I'm not self-identified with the violence and the trauma like I used to be. I am not the trauma or the violence that I experience. I am something else. And we want to skillfully use identification with ego, because we're talking about relative means to experience the ultimate. So it's like, and this is what we do, in higher forms of Vajrayana Tibetan Buddhist practice. When we become the deity, we're just becoming something else that isn't so violent. A skillful means is like, okay, I can be this really violent thing, or I can be this deity. And through the deity becomes a gateway into selflessness, into basic nature. So I'm not sure what your practice is. Are you in the tantric tradition or just meditation? You have anything? I would explore Tara, the practice of Tara, the female Buddha of compassion. I think that she's, for me, has been transformative. And you can read about her, the books and everything, and there are practices on YouTube that you can watch, but she's been really helpful for me. Okay. Is there one more?
Yeah, I just, the balance between self-care and
Yeah.
that broken-heartedness.
Yeah.
It feels to me that when I really inhabit that broken-heartedness, it provokes more hostility from some
Yeah.
people.
Oh yeah.
Like that reaction to the Me Too argument or Black Lives Matter.
Okay.
Provoking a kind of, I don't know, you're attacking us. That sense that being open about the violence you have experienced is heard by those with more privilege as an attack on them. And that's another trauma to process, another thing to stay open to. How do you balance that with self-care?
Yeah. Well, first of all, I don't do other people's work like that. So I'm not going to take responsibility for your activity, because that's actually, it says something about your relationship to the violence. It's a way in which we bypass our relationship and the violence by saying, you know what, you shouldn't talk about that. And then at that point I'm like, oh, that's not mine. And I think as marginalized people within marginalized communities, we're conditioned in some way to make people in more dominant positions comfortable and okay. And boy, did I feel better when I started challenging that. It's like my job isn't to take care of you, to make you feel good as I go through my process, And I challenge people to say, why am I reacting? Why are you reacting to my experiences of racism? Or whatever it may be, to whatever kind of phobia, like why does this trigger you so much, and why are you making it about you? And it's how you give the work back. This isn't about you. You're so vain. Why do you think my trauma is about you? So people always come to me with that. They're like, oh, you should be quiet, you should be like whatever, you should be, that's what I hear, But it's not like, there's compassion there. It's, well, I get it. Like, I get it, this is hard, But like, I have to do this for me. And I do it publicly because I want to inspire you to do this. And of course, there's going to be consequences. There's going to be backlash. You know, and that's a whole nother thing. That holding space for the backlash of you trying to get free. When people are like, "What are you doing? Why do you deserve to be free?" You know, again, it's like, why is my freedom about you? You know? It's like Aikido, and this is the last thing I'll say. It's Aikido. For those of you who practice Aikido, get really sophisticated about maneuvering around. Don't put effort into it, but like just tip the energy back to people. You know. So that's it. That's it. Thank you. Thank you so much, everyone, for coming out tonight. It's been so wonderful. I'll be at Insight, London, sometime this week. Literally, I think there's, isn't the 13th, which is? I'm confused. Anyhow, just check the website. People have all been telling me different things, and apparently I don't read the schedule. I just show up places. But thank you again for everyone coming out tonight, and I hope to see you again while I'm in London too. So thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Lama Rod, for making up answers and gently leading us to taste those experiences. Just got a few announcements, which are that we have some copies. If you'd like to go further into the Radical Dharma, we do have a limited number of copies of the book on sale. And if these issues have come alive for you, or they're just staying alive for you, and you would like to talk to someone connected to the Shambhala Centre, we have a Director of Societal Health and Wellbeing, which is Elliot, who's just here. If you wanted to communicate anything, that could be feedback, it could be questions, his email is just on the notice board on the right as you go out. There's a red notice board with some contact details. And then the last thing to mention is that there is a suggested donation for the evening, and that is to go to Lama Rod. We would call that a heart gift, maybe a broken heart gift tonight.
To support my bad habits.
To support the bad habits.
That I call self-care.
So the suggested donation is £10. So we have there's a bowl for cash, we have a card machine too. So that would be.
You can give more as well.
You can give more as well.
It's just a suggested place to start.
I can't top that. So thank you and good night.
I'm always helpful.